Finally, we have arrived, my friends. We are but 24 hours or so away from WWE Fastlane, the strange event that's basically been born into existence so that WWE can try the brand new WWE Network on Peacock in the USA, because obviously if that went down during WrestleMania, everybody would go crazy. And talking about WrestleMania 2, it also seems like WWE has already sold out WrestleMania. So if you have been longing for the return of fans, well, you're about to get 25,000 of them. But before we do get to that, we have to take the broken finger of power and give the good bits and up and the bad bits are down for the latest episode of Smackdown, which also served as the go-home show for that pay-per-view known as Fastlane. You know why it is called Fastlane? Because we're on the road to WrestleMania. And what's another word for road? Lane? Aren't I a smart boy? Let's up those downs. I'm just so confused about everything that's going on between Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair. Now look, let me make it very clear. I love Reginald, I love Reggie, I love Reg, but still, none of this makes any sense because the first thing we saw on SmackDown was Sasha and Bianca, and they were arguing about Reginald, they were arguing about the fact that Sasha Banks is going to take on Nia Jax, they were arguing about the fact that Bianca Belair wasn't going to help, and I just sat there going, why? Because why does she care? Why would Belair give two hoots? She's already got a shot at the SmackDown Women's Championship after winning the flipping Royal Rumble, and I'll tell you why this little story exists, because that stupid event known as Fastlane. Somebody went, well, we better come up with some kind of narrative, and this was the result. Even though she had just had a massive row seconds beforehand too, Sasha Banks then did her entrance, and she was as happy as Larry, like nothing going on with me, look how happy I've got the glee. Regret doing that, but either way down. Because just let them be them, and just let them go, I'm the better wrestler, no, I'm the better wrestler. They're awesome. We then also found out that Reginald is not going to be on SmackDown tonight because Nia Jax had treated him to a spa day. And given that he wasn't on Raw either, I just hope everything is okay with him and some bad news isn't about to come out there. But then it was Nia Jax versus Sasha Banks for the SmackDown Women's Championship, and I will say this, it was very fun. That was mostly because we have a brand new champion. No, we don't, but I'm going to do it every time. Still think it's kind of bizarre we did this match to begin with, but in the first few minutes, Sasha Banks was booked exactly like Sasha Banks should be booked, because she took out Shayna Baszler at ringside, she was actually whooping Nia Jax's ass, and she had the Banks statement in around about 32 seconds, and if Nia wasn't so strong, there's every chance that she would have tapped out. Instead, she grabbed Banks, started chucking her around the ring. Of course, eventually Bianca Belair did arrive on the scene after Nia Jax had given Sasha Banks a Samoan drop for a close near 2-fall, and now she was Sasha's best friend, and even Michael Cole was like, well, I'm sure she just came out here because she understood that Banks needed her support. Nia then had Sasha in the stretch muffler position, so swung her head right into the turnbuckle, and I honestly thought she was dead, and that's when in the distance you heard some kind of noise, and it was some kind of WWE official going, oh, quick, cue the shenanigans, because Bianca Belair and Shayna Baszler started fighting at ringside, and then they ended up in the squared circle. It meant Shayna threw a kick, but she utterly missed and accidentally flopped Nia Jax in the head instead. And of course, Sasha Banks was like, oh, I have an opening. So she hit the most devastating move in all of sports entertainment, and she got the 1, 2, 3. I mean, I'm pretty sure Sasha could have just used her big move and won because she is the champion. Whatever, bring down the distraction board. Yes, that's number 41. These two can now lose to the tag team champions on Sunday, and then please, just separate all of these belts. We don't need it, and just give me a very nice and simple Sasha Banks versus Bianca Belair feud. Thanks. Edge was then cutting a promo, and he hates Roman Reigns, and he hates Jey Uso, and he hates Daniel Bryan. No, he doesn't hate Daniel Bryan. In fact, he now respects Daniel Bryan, even though he got kneed in the head by him last week. But as far as a rated R superstar was concerned, if he was in the same position, he would have done it too. He's also going to win his big match later against Uso and become the special guest enforcer for the main event at Fastlane. I was like, cool. We then randomly got a highlight video from 19 years ago that showed Edge teaming up with Hulk Hogan to beat Billy and Chuck for the tag team champions. And what WWE had done here, well, it was twofold. One, they showed a bunch of these videos throughout the night because, of course, it was Edge's first match on SmackDown in 10 years. But this one, they also used as a lead-in to confirm that at WrestleMania 37, we are going to have two hosts, and one is going to be Titus O'Neil, and the other is going to be Hulk Hogan. Personally, I would have just given this to Titus, but we've talked about all of this before. I don't need to talk about it again. Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler were then all upset with each other, and Nia was like, Shayna, if you hadn't done that, I'd have the title around my shoulder right now. And she's flipping right. This is the problem. Sasha Banks needs to be a strong, dominant champion, not being called out like this. Anyway, to make up for this, Shayna Baszler is now going to take on Bianca Belair later to prove her worth to the cause. And as a little bit of a spoiler, that just comes crumbling down too. Seth Rollins was up next, and I love him more and more every week. Let's go through our recap. Because the first week he was dressed like water, the second week he was dressed like a rug, the third week he was dressed like a cloud, the fourth week he was dressed like a pair of lips, the fifth week he was dressed like a country garden, and on week 6, or tonight, he basically came out here looking like a felt tip pen. Seth Rollins has just become the best, and I'm only just talking about his dress game. He is still furious at Cesaro too, especially because he swung him 22 times, and I love the fact that he counted because it just makes this whole character even more crazy than you thought he was already. And just as he was laying into the Swift Superman, he got interrupted by Shinsuke Nakamura. Now all I know when it comes to these two is that last week they had a stare down, and this week we had a stare down, but Shinsuke wasn't taking any squid this time because he beat the hell out of Seth, including kneeing him right in the face. At this stage, I presumed that we were going to get this at Fastlane, and then later on Michael Cole went, hey, we're going to get it at Fastlane. And I think that's pretty cool because Seth Rollins can win, he can then go on to face Cesaro at WrestleMania, and at least it means the pay-per-view will have a pretty good match. I mean, how can Seth Rollins versus Shinsuke Nakamura be bad? Unless someone comes up with some kind of stupid stipulation like, oh, you can only win by using a sword. It is WWE, they may do it, but up. We also then got it confirmed that Eric Bischoff is going into the Hall of Fame, and if you don't think this is deserved, I think you may have lost your mind. I mean, he was behind WCW Nitro, which basically changed the wrestling industry, and even when he was just being a TV performer, he was very good. Congratulations to Eazy-E. This then led into a match between the Street Profits and the Mysterios, and while it was a very fun match, because of course it was, what I especially like about the tag team scene on SmackDown is that we finally have some flipping teams. I mean, we still need some more, but they're all interacting and they're all going off in their different directions. Hopefully it ends with a big brawl at WrestleMania. That is fine. Ziggler and Rude joined the commentary team as Michael Cole reminded them, oh Robert, don't forget you got pinned last week by Montez Ford, so surely the Street Profits deserve a shot at the titles. And then back in the ring, we were just going at like 942 miles an hour. How does Rey Mysterio keep doing this? He is almost 50 years old. Both father and son went for the 619, but both also failed at that. And then I was like, wait, isn't Rey meant to be teaching Dominic the ways of how to beat Baron Corbin? I mean, we dropped that story like a stone. And as the Profits went for the Doomsday device, Rey snuck through Angelo Dawkins' legs. He knocked Montez Ford off the top rope. And basically, to cut a long story short, Dominic then Hurricane Rana'd Angelo into a pin, and he scored the 1-2-3. You go, Dobby. Chad Gable and Otis arrived afterwards, and Gable was all like, I hate everybody here, you all suck, and you make me really sad. I used to be Shorty G, but I'm not anymore. And then I assumed this was just a scenario where the good guys could take out the bad guys, because that's what happened with a bunch of dives. But then no, randomly, we were just having another match. I mean, talk about 2021 WWE Wrestling, because then it did just become the Alpha Academy taking on the Mysterios. And if you're asking yourself why, I figured it out. Ever wonder why a man is unsteadily stood on a chair halfway through a SmackDown review show where really no man should ever be stood unsteadily on a chair and slowly spinning around during a SmackDown review show? Well, sometimes, much like in WWE, stuff just happens. So if you're concerned about the fact that I may fall down and break my own head open, please do give us a call on 0800 Stuff Just Happens. Somebody is always there waiting to take your call and explain why from nowhere we got a random tag team match on the latest episode of WWE programming. I really am in an unsteady position. Of course, that makes perfect sense, and I just don't see why WWE needed to do this, because Otis and Gable won, meaning the win that the Mysterios just got was instantly negated. This time the Street Profits were also on commentary, so now you had about 842 people on there. But look, as much as I'm ranting and raving and having a little bit of fun, Rey Mysterio, Dominic Mysterio, Chad Gable and Otis, of course they had a really fun match up. Dominic took the pin this time after he'd been hit by the best looking German suplex ever, courtesy of Chad Gable, and Otis finished him off with that dive off the second rope. And like you, I'm still going, why has Otis turned to the dark side? Because usually when people get a heel turn, they're not allowed to cut a promo on the next week's SmackDown or whatever. Otis hasn't been allowed to say a word. And if I didn't know any better, and of course I don't because I'm a moron, I think we may have just started teasing Kevin Owens versus Sami Zayn for WrestleMania, and my word, I need that more than hair. They bumped into each other again here, and Sami Zayn was like, oh, Kevin Owens, you gotta be a part of my documentary. And KO's had a few days to think about it, and he'd rather not, mostly because Sami Zayn is now an insane person, and it's best to keep his distance. Sami's also furious because he's got a match against Baron Corbin later, and after ranting about Logan Paul for a while, he just stormed off. Also, does anybody else want this documentary to be released? And as it turns out, it's actually focused on how crazy Sami Zayn is now, which in itself would be a conspiracy against Sami Zayn. Me too. We were then clearly trying to remind everyone what a big deal it is that Edge is having a singles match here on SmackDown, because we had another video, and this one was from 14 years ago, when he cashed in his Money in the Bank on The Undertaker and became the World Heavyweight Champion. I tell you, man, that is just good times. Following this was Daniel Bryan cutting a promo, and he's just the best. He went on about the fact that Edge is going to have his first match in ages on the blue brand, but also that the Rated R superstar could be the special enforcer at Fastlane, but that could also be Jey Uso, and no matter how he looks at it, somebody's probably going to screw him over. Because he knows he can't trust Jey Uso, but he's not 100% sure about Edge, because as far as Daniel Bryan is concerned, while Edge knows he can beat Roman Reigns, he's not entirely sure he can beat Daniel Bryan. Either way, he is going to win the Universal title on Sunday, and then out came Mr. Miserable and his morose mates. All Roman Reigns and friends. Reigns thought it was hilarious that Bryan thought he was going to defeat him at Fastlane, but he was also really mad because Daniel Bryan had said he was going to tap out. I was like, of course Roman Reigns is mad. Roman Reigns would get mad if you served him dinner and it was too salty, even though he was in charge of the salt. Roman also noted that he's never tapped out in his career and that he would rather die in the ring than do this. I was like, you know what, Roman? I totally believe you. I look into your eyes and all I see is chaos. Daniel just thought all of this was hilarious and then fired back with the line, well, everybody thinks they're not going to tap until they tap. And these two have done such a good job in convincing me that maybe, just maybe, Daniel Bryan is actually going to win the Universal title on Sunday, but of course he's not. But following on from that maybe, just maybe, at WrestleMania, we are going to do the triple threat. And at one point, that seemed so surreal. He then made it clear that he doesn't want Roman Reigns to die at the pay-per-view, and I laughed. But all of this is for naught anyway, because again, he's going to be the champion. Roman Reigns just melted down like, oh, there's the head of the table. And all of this was just flipping excellent. And then, what the hell happened? Because we were getting ready for Sami Zayn versus Baron Corbin, when we got a video that essentially said, these two guys suck, nobody wants to watch this match, we'd all rather take our face and plunge it into a vat of acid than have to sit through this, and they referred to Sami Zayn as like the irritable one and Baron Corbin as the unlikable one. So I was like, who made this? What's going on? This is a conspiracy against Sami Zayn. And even Baron Corbin afterwards on social media was like, well, maybe I agree with Sami now, because that wasn't very nice. Now look, it did make me laugh, but a small part of me, my nerd geek side of me, is like, is this a good idea? Should we really be running down our own talent like this? But I'm going to assume that it is tying into a bigger story. And once again, I was kind of entertained. I'm also excited about where all this is headed, because maybe we do get Kevin Owens versus Sami Zayn, or maybe we get those two with Baron Corbin in there for a triple threat. All of that is all right by me, so up. KO was also on commentary as we were doing Sami Zayn versus Baron Corbin, and Sami was such an absolute dick here. Because not only did he poke Baron Corbin in the eye, but he also pinned him and put his feet on the ropes, but thankfully the referee caught him. And I was like, this is just continuing the face turn for Baron. Because if you go through every single one of his narratives like the last 6 months, he is getting screwed over every turn, and I actually feel quite sorry for him. Zayn then went to remove the turnbuckle pad, but when he turned around, Baron Corbin was waiting with the end of days, and he smashed him for the 1-2-3, and I chuckled at this because Sami Zayn is just such a fool. He carried that on afterwards as well because he went absolutely livid and was pleading with Kevin Owens saying, can you see it? I can't believe it. What are we going to do? And when KO told him, dude, I think you just lost because you suck, Sami Zayn haluva kicked him right in the face, and that sent me all excited down in my loins because like, oh my gosh, we are going to do Kevin Owens versus Sami Zayn at WrestleMania, and if you know your history, well, that's just something you want to see. We then had one of those sit-down interviews that WWE loves to do when somebody is over here and somebody is over here, but they're in different rooms. But because it was between Big E and Apollo Crews, and both these guys are just killing it right now, well, it was one of the best things on SmackDown. They were both just so wound up by the other one, and I really enjoy what Big E is doing at the moment, because when he goes all serious, he comes across like he a bit crazy too, but that's far more realistic than the usual, I'm gonna come find you and I'm gonna come rip your arms off. Because if you were friends with somebody and then they turned their back on you like Apollo Crews had done, you would be a little bit unhinged, and I think Big E is doing it perfectly, and also it's different, and when you're doing something different and people are talking about it, then you're doing it right. He also told Apollo that he should enjoy these 48 hours before Fastlane, because when they get there, that's it. So yes, Big E is going to murder Apollo Crews. Apollo then reminded Big E that he is royalty and you can't talk to him like that, and that actually what's going to happen at the pay-per-view is that Crews is going to be standing over Big E's mangled body. And do you know what the definition of mangle is too? It's to destroy or crush beyond recognition. Uh-oh. This annoyed Big E so much that he just left his room and he got on a golf cart trying to find Apollo Crews. And when he did, my word, he beat him up so bad, I was like, well, I don't think Apollo Crews is even going to make it to Fastlane. He got broken up when a bunch of officials got in there and Apollo Crews got in the golf cart and drove off, and that really had me giggling. And somehow, we need to get through Sunday and rebook this for WrestleMania, because these two guys have done such a good job, they deserve to pay it off on the grandest stage of them all. I don't even mind if Big E loses his IC championship here, because it will justify Apollo's turn. So really, for me as a fan, that is a win-win situation. So really, this is all I want from my pro wrestling. And while we are talking about Big E, don't forget to go and support his project at ourheroesrock.org. It is a worthy cause. This whole Sasha Banks, Bianca Belair, Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler thing then got out of control. Because it was Baszler versus Bianca, but we didn't really get much of a match. I mean, at first Sasha Banks pretended she was going to do her entrance, and then went, no, and she just left. And then halfway through, Nia, who was still raging about what happened earlier, she went, bye-bye Shayna, and she left as well. Then from nowhere, Natalya and no one Mina, hey look, it's Tamina in the ring, and they were just beating Shayna Baszler and Bianca Belair up. So it ended in a disqualification. So bring down the DQ board for 2021, and that goes up to 16. And look, I wouldn't even mind all of this as an angle if we weren't just taking all of the championships and throwing it into one big pot. Because you could have Sasha and Bianca doing their own thing, and then sure, Natalya and nobody meaner than Tamina could be involved in the tag team scene, but you could put Bayley in there, you could put Liv Morgan in there, you could put Ruby Riott on there. I know she's on Raw, but hey, Peyton Royce needs something to do. But because we're not doing that, all these people just weren't on SmackDown, and I think that's a travesty. All we've done is just tighten the nest too much, so you can't feature other people. For that very one reason, it's getting it down. Our last Edge video was next. It was focused on his retirement in 2011. And if you can watch that and not understand the story that WWE is telling now, and kind of be excited about Edge winning his championship back that he never lost, then you've just got a cold heart, my friend, or you're Roman Reigns. It was, of course, all a lead into our big match between Edge and Jey Uso to see who was going to be the special enforcer for Fastlane. And I gotta say, all things considered, that Edge, he can still go up. And sure, there's a little bit of ring rust there, but he'll be able to knock that out. He's naturally just good at this stuff. And Daniel Bryan was on commentary for this, which was like the theme for SmackDown this week. It was like, oh, just get a bunch of people and sit them next to Michael Cole and Corey Graves. The story of the match tied into the fact that Jey Uso had wounded Edge's ribs, so he was all like, oh, God, I can't go on. But in order to balance that out, he then hurt Jey Uso's shoulder, and it was that injury that basically cost Jey Uso the match. And also his life, because obviously he'll go backstage and Roman will go pfft and shoot him in the eye. The craziest bit though was that Uso got a near fall after a Samoan drop, and when he went for his big splash off the top rope, Edge was back to his feet. He went up there as well, and he gave Jey Uso a Hurricane Rana off the top rope. And I have never been so terrified or so scared for somebody's neck in my entire life. I turned into Edge's dad. I was like, please, for goodness sake, Adam, would you be careful? He also went for the spear, but Uso reversed that into a super kick, and that looked absolutely badass. And Jey even hit the big splash. I was like, my gosh, that's it. But Edge was able to kick out, once again back to his feet, hit Jey with the spear. 1, 2, 3. Edge gonna be your enforcer. He then started eyeballing Daniel Bryan, who of course was on commentary, and he shouldn't have done that, because when he turned around, he got speared out of his shoes thanks to Roman Reigns. And after Roman had goaded Daniel Bryan to get in there as well, here was crazy Jey Uso. He whipped Daniel Bryan's ass, put him back in the squared circle. Roman then spared him, meaning this week's episode of SmackDown ended with our tribal chief, the head of the table. Oh, Roman Reigns, we love you, standing tall. So this tease for a triple threat match at WrestleMania is in full force, and while look, deep down in my toes, my tootsie toes, I don't believe Daniel Bryan is going to be champion. In like this finger, at the tip of this finger, there's just something going, but what if he does? And that's all you need to do. Plant the seed of doubt. SmackDown's a terrific show, and it's good enough. Now, don't forget to leave a comment below and let us know what you thought about last night's SmackDown. Like the video, share the video, and please do subscribe. We would appreciate it. Then you can head over to WhatCulture.com and you can read yourself some articles. You can watch other videos on YouTube that are around my head. And please do follow us on social media, because then we can say hello every single day. My name is Simon from WhatCulture. Thank you for joining me as always. And of course, I'll be back on Monday when we up those downs for Fastlane.